Welcome to WitchLit, a place to talk about the craft of writing and writing the craft. I'm your host, Victoria Raschke, author, publisher, witch, and nosy Scorpio. Award-winning author D.B. Sieders was born and raised in East Tennessee and spent her childhood hiking in the Great Smoky Mountains, wading barefoot in creeks, chasing salamanders, fish, and frogs. Her family loved to tell stories while sitting around the campfire. Those days of frog chasing sparked her interest in biology. She is a working scientist by day, but she never lost her love of telling stories. DB writes urban fantasy and paranormal romance. Her stories feature unlikely heroes and heroines who face a healthy dose of angst as they strive for redemption and a happily ever after, which everyone deserves. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee with a husband, 2 children, a rotating number of cats, and her very active imagination. DB Sieders, welcome to WitchLit.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited.
You're one of my favorite authors and favorite people in the whole world. So I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, you're a very sweet human. And I will do my full disclosure that DB and I know each other.
Yes.
We are longtime friends. So I'm just excited to have you on the show. We've had just life intervene a lot. So it's nice to finally make this happen. So
absolutely. It's so nice to have my writing mojo back and be back and active. And when I chat with you guys, I'm like, yeah, I actually did something. It's really nice. I'm going to produce words. I've got more stories. They're not blocked by life and COVID and all that stuff.
Exciting. All right. So our first question for everybody on the show is, in this age of a million different ways to communicate, why write?
Writing, I don't know. For me, it's a way of processing the human experience. That's the fancy way of saying it. I mean, honestly, I've always loved to tell stories. I've always loved to listen to stories. And when I first started writing, after a few glasses of wine, I just had a spark in my imagination looking out on my back deck going, oh, wow, what if there was a ghost in the tree line? Well, the ghost comes out. Why would a ghost be there? And why would he be visiting this particular person who's sitting on the deck? Not me. She's not me, but, thinking in terms of that. And that I thought that was going to be a cute little short story. And it turned out to be my first novel. And I've been hooked and I can't stop. It's fun. It's engaging. It's challenging. And when somebody actually bothers to write or leave a review saying, I really liked your story, or it helped me through a hard time, or one person, and I will treasure her forever, said that she rediscovered her love of reading. Oh my God, you can't get a higher compliment from anybody. So, I mean, that high as well. But I just feel like, there's so many, I don't know if it's the voices in my head just need to get out, or just, kind of processing, again, the human experience. That's why I love to write.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, having a reader tell you something like that really is like a measure of success.
Yeah, I go back and look at that when I'm feeling like, why am I doing this? What is the point? Oh, that's the point. Somebody sitting in a space where they're worried about a loved one, whether they're worried about, things that are going on in the world, the political situation, or their life, or going through a traumatic experience. Reading and finding a great story where that the characters are going to persevere and overcome. It is the literature of hope. And that's just really fantastic. Yeah. If I can take somebody out of a dark moment and give them surcease, that's also a really good thing too.
Oh, yeah. No, I like that a lot. So I know this, but I want you to tell everybody else what your writing journey was like, because you come from a very different place. I mean, you come from a very academic background, not in writing.
Oh, no.
You're a storyteller. So do you want to talk about like how you got into actually publishing stories? And
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I wrote my first manuscript, which after extensive revisions, which were definitely needed, became published. But once I had a story written and once I kind of looked at it, I'm like, okay, well, what does it look like? How does one get published? Well, I should probably, join a professional society. So back when RWA at least wasn't as openly ick as it has been, for the past several years, I got into that. And it was really great just to okay, you have a story, everybody has a story, but learning craft, learning how to pace it, learning how to develop characters, learning a lot of show versus tell. And a lot of my stuff was, I know what's in my head and the character knows, but being able to convey that in a way that's engaging with readers. And as far as like, yeah, I'm very scientifically minded. I do biomedical research. I used to do that at the laboratory. Now I do that for a nonprofit. And it's just like, it's so concise, and the stories that we tell there, because of the nature of the writing, are so boring. And so I needed a creative outlet, something to exercise the other part of my brain that I've always been a mythology nut and nerd. I would read Encyclopedia Britannica about all the Greek and Roman and Norse gods and all that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a great way. And I was always fascinated by, why did they do that? Why did they behave this way? And as I got older, I'm like, oh, okay, it's a reflection of the society, and it's telling about the human experience. So mythology is a fantastic, fun place to play in, as you know, because you do that too. So that probably was the spark that got me interested in writing the kinds of things that I write. So mythical creatures, gods, mermaids, pulled from different types of lore. I was so excited to discover Yoruba culture and the Orisha, which I think I've seen some more stories published about them recently, especially by authors of color. And I'm so delighted, because that world is just incredibly rich and a wonderful place to engage with stories. So that's kind of how I got into it. Just like I needed an outlet. I wanted to explore my love of mythology and just nerd out on all of that. And then, romance at its heart, I love a happy ending. I'm a sucker for a love story. I put my characters through quite a lot. And
you do. I can verify.
The thing that I like is, because sometimes in romance, I'm not going to knock on any genre or any particular way of doing things, but I had read a lot where the goal of the book or the goal of the romance is you have a broken man or a broken woman and the partner saves them. And I'm like, I don't like that. I would like to see them go through stuff, do the work on their own to heal, maybe because they want to be able to bring something to the relationship, or, they have the will to do something now. I like to see them fix their stuff and then come back together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was the first manuscript you got published?
The very first, it actually blends both worlds. It's not a very good story. I tried contemporary romance at first. It was called Red Shoes for Lab Blues, published by Lyrical Press, which I think is now a subsidiary of Kensington. It was a cute little short story based on the lab. No paranormal elements there, but it was a great experience just learning how to craft, a story. I was still working on what would eventually become Waking the Dead, and massaging that and getting it into a much better shape. But it's really the first tight story that I did from beginning to end. And, I learned a lot from it. It's not bad, but it was definitely, I think the key for, if you're thinking about writing or if you want to write, you need to finish a couple of things. Mm-hmm. You could spend a whole lot of time reworking the opening, reworking the first chapter, and just sit and do that for years and years. I've seen people do it, but you need to finish something and accept the fact that it's not going to be perfect because it's your first time out, or even your second or third. But each manuscript, you're going to learn something. You're going to get better at your craft. You're going to get better at plotting. You're going to get better at characterization. For me, what was and still is a challenge is grounding in the setting. So I've just accepted that my process is I need to go in, write the action, write the dialogue, and then go back and layer in the setting details.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. I often have, I get lost setting up the setting and I forget that I'm telling a story.
And I love getting lost in your worlds, because I literally feel like I'm in Slovenia and I can smell the tea and pastries, and I can see this mysterious person walking down the street and wondering if they're a god in disguise. I envy your ability to ground in the setting.
The grass is always greener. The grass is always greener.
I know. That's how it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Always. So most of the folks I've talked to on the show, obviously, write either witchy or paranormal stuff, or they write nonfiction books about witchcraft and magical practice in the world. So it's, Mad WitchLit podcast. So you come from a very scientific background. So what pulled you into write? I mean, obviously mythology, but is there something, how do you think magic works in the world?
I think magic Well, I used to be such a skeptic, but I'd worked with somebody, especially this was after I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I found it very cathartic to do some kind of manifesting. So what we did was we wrote down, it was a very visual thing. So I was able to draw a picture of my tumor, draw a picture of it being destroyed. I crushed up some of my medicine, put it in there along with my creams, and then set an intention to the world that we're done with this, we're moving on, and burned it. And I honestly felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Oh. So, the power of belief, the power of being able to, through whatever practice you have, to take back some of your agency and take back some of your power. I mean, I think that's amazing. And then some other manifestation things that I've been able to do too are like, okay, what's your goal? You want to get a new grant. You want to move on to a different career. So just writing it down. How are you going to get there? And then just the act of like wrapping the string around the candle and then burning it, sending it out into the universe. That's just, for me, that is how I think magic works. Although everybody has different experiences. I know people who've seen ghosts. I know people who swear that spirits communicate with them. I've never experienced that personally, but with the manifestation. And then I swear the one and only supernatural kind of experience I had was shortly after a very close cousin of mine passed away. And several months after that, I was visiting the Netherlands, visiting my in-laws, and I had the most vivid dream of her. So Sherry was on stage, I was in the audience, and she was there with her family, with her loved ones. It was kind of like a whole play about her life. And at the end, I felt very peaceful because she made me feel like she was at peace. So I think that was her way of telling me that she was okay and that I could move on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that would kind of be, I don't know. I think having those experiences where you really, there isn't another explanation. Like you just,
exactly.
It's a weird, because I'm a skeptic at heart, but I also believe, I
skeptic at heart too. But at the same time, I mean, and I love AJ's phrase, today's magic is tomorrow's science. But whether there's an explanation for it now or not, does it help? Does it bring you comfort? Does it bring you peace? I'm all about, like, even though I have issues with, alternative therapies and woo-woo, especially in the cancer space. But if you're taking your medicine and you want to pray, if you want to do some kind of new age crystal stuff, whatever brings you comfort and peace and makes you feel like you have some of your agency back, do it. Do it, because there is power in that. Yeah.
I'm going to pause for a second.
Sure.
Is there music playing in your house somewhere?
I'm so sorry. That's my husband. Let me go tell him to.
Because when you talk, I can hear it. It's okay.
I apologize. I don't know. Maybe I should try these again and see if I can get the feedback off of that. Because he thinks I'm on here in my
That jack would work. Okay.
Oh yeah, that worked. Okay.
Okay.
I think it must be that your mic on your computer is really sensitive.
It must be. Okay. All right. Yeah. I apologize for that. I hope I didn't throw anything out of the moment. Yeah. I didn't even realize, Patrick's out there playing his music. So.
Oh, no. Kaifa was playing video games earlier and I was like, oh, okay. Oh, well, so now I got to get back to where we were. Oh, okay. So skepticism. So having, that understanding of kind of like the agency of magic and stuff, how do you decide what magic in the books is going to look like? Because fiction magic is, I always call it CGI magic. It's not like this kind of like manifestation agency magic that, people who actually practice magic do. It's
right.
It's special effects. So how do you decide what level of special effects your worlds are going to have?
I really had to come to, and I got some good advice again from our mutual friend AJ about avoid the Superman complex where your hero or your heroine has so much magic that they can magic themselves out of anything. So I think the first thing is, if you're going to use any kind of magic, make sure you understand the rules and you can convey that to your readers, and make sure that there are limits. There are things where they have to either use their head, their heart, good old-fashioned working through stuff, whether it's battling a monster or trying to win the love of your life back. For me, the magic is just like an interesting way to explore, again, the human experience. So for the mermaid books, when I wrote Lorelei's Lyric, which is about Lorelei of the Rhine, who is coming over with her sisters to Nashville to have kind of a last hurrah before she has to take over the throne for the kingdom, she's coming from a place where she's got this curse. So I always love the idea of mermaids because they're either portrayed as healers and with beautiful music and they can heal people, or they lure men to their deaths with their deadly voices. So like that dichotomy was very interesting to me. And so I was like, okay, well, if she's coming over, what kind of person would she, what's her ideal hero? Who's going to help her find her way to work through this curse? I'm like, oh, it would be a musician. Obviously she would be drawn to his music, but I'm like, okay, so she loves to sing, but through the magic in the world, her voice is cursed. If somebody listens to it long enough, they're going to die or walk into the water and plunge to their death. So what would be better for her, because that's all she wants to do is sing, than somebody who has the opportunity to sing, but he's so down on his luck and discouraged, he doesn't want to use this amazing talent that he can do. And that makes her really angry. So her magic calls him, but then she has to come to terms with the fact that, okay, he's dealing with his own issues. The reason why he doesn't want to sing is because he's had these terrible traumatic experiences. He doesn't feel worthy anymore. So they kind of mirror each other. I don't know if that answers the question about like how magic works, but for me, it's just like she just happens to be a mermaid, and the connection to it, she could have easily been anybody else. But I think the magical element of having a deadly voice. And I mean, I envy people who can write contemporary romance, because I'm always like, if I'm at a struggle with like a plot point, oh, we got to throw in another monster, another magical critter, because that's just my go-to. And it's so easy because like, then you have to explain what they're doing, and you can have a battle, or you can have them casting, like you said, magical hand farts with like, you see on all of the covers, like casting magic and stuff. Right. So it's a great action thing to do too.
Yeah, I tried writing contemporary romance and kept murdering people. So
yeah, I know
it didn't work for me.
It's like I've read beautiful contemporary romance and a lot of healing, from trauma and then all that stuff too. It's just like I can't get into that space where it's like I want a monster to come in.
Yeah, same.
They need to. Really. I guess it's the proverbial slay the dragon,
So that series, the Southern Elemental Guardian series that Lorelei's Lyric kicks off. That one of the things I love about your books, and just A, because I enjoy them, but B, is that they're all set in Tennessee.
Oh yeah, I love Tennessee so much. It's and it's not like I've read a lot of things. Big cities are usually like the super exciting places to be, or far away worlds. But I'm like, I love the idea, and some of my favorite books are magic, like hiding in plain sight. So like whether it's a smallish town in Slovenia, or whether it's Nashville, Tennessee, and you're walking down the streets and you might pass a fey creature, or you might pass a demon. You just don't know. I love that. And it's also been fun and an excuse for me to go explore different places in Tennessee, really explore downtown. And every time I'm down there or in, different parts of the surrounding areas, thinking about, well, why would they go there? Oh, this has the best barbecue. So, everybody loves barbecue. You can be a mermaid, you can be a demon, you can be a flying sylph. Everybody loves barbecue. So let's throw in some of the local flavor too. I think it's just like, it's nice seasoning, and it's something I know. So, I've been to New York a couple of times, but it doesn't feel like home. I like being able to bring a touch of home to the series.
Yeah. And I think that, and you across the series, Nashville is kind of become its own character, like, because you just you don't think about, having lived in Nashville too, that you don't think about Nashville being a particularly magical place.
Right.
Like you said, magic and hiding in plain sight can be anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Nashville could be full of fey creatures and mermaids. Who knows?
Yeah. Why not?
Or in your most recent series, demons.
Demons, yeah. Demons who unfortunately get a bad rap. They're not all evil.
Yeah.
They're just different. In my world, they're interdimensional creatures. Yes, they do feed on human shortcomings. That's part of the tempter class of demons. But by and large, they've come from this realm where they're on lower and power structure, and they're refugees just seeking to have a nice life where they're not persecuted by the higher demons.
So what
but
was
every
this?
now and again they get into trouble.
Yeah, they get into a lot of trouble. So what was the spark for the new series? For the Catching Hell is the first book, right?
Catching Hell, yeah. Again, it's set in Nashville because I love me some Nashville, and especially like the opening scene was so much fun to write because you go downtown and it's the pedal taverns and the woo girls. So this not poor character, but this character Jinx McGee, who I love because she's so different than me. She's 5'0". She's got a little woman syndrome. She's a badass. She's really got great fighting skills, but then she's also got some times where she can't find her car, and she's addicted to tacos and tequila, and she stops to take a shot off one of the pedal taverns before she goes off and chases this demon who she thinks is a garden variety tempter demon, but it turns out he's a lot more, and sets off the stage for bigger, more powerful demons are coming to Nashville, and she has to figure out why and has to figure out how to send them back before they cause mayhem and chaos in the human world.
Yeah. And so next book in that series is what you're working on now, right?
I am, yeah. So spoiler alert, but at the end of the first book, Jinx has a major curveball thrown into her world and her powers. So her story is she's demon possessed from the age of 5. And so she's always been different. She's always thought she was somehow the bad kid or the bad seed, because otherwise why would she get this demon inside her? So, but she's used that as an asset because the demon who's inhabiting her is really good at tracking other demons. So that's how she gets drawn into the world of demon hunting and capture. And they usually try to do capture and give them a fair shot. They'll give them a trial and try and figure out why they messed up or what they did. And then you either get another shot or you can get sent back to the Hell Realm or you can be destroyed. So she's been living in that space for quite some time. And all of a sudden at the end of the book, her demon is gone. She finds out she is from a different lineage. So she's spent over a decade perfecting her fighting skills and really being competent, knowing what she's doing. And she does solve the case at great personal cost. But now there's a bunch of other demons that escape through the portal that she has to deal with in the upcoming books. And she's got to retrain. She's got all of these fighting abilities, but she can't rely on her personal demon anymore. She's got other tools in her arsenal, but they're unreliable. The magic's it can't come to her call. And she's really got to struggle with who is she at her heart? Because she's always been a demon-possessed demon hunter, and like now she's maybe more or less human than she was before, but like what's her identity? And like that's going to be a lot of what she's working out, of course, while she's chasing the master demon of sloth. Their tool, let's not give away gender because the spoiler alert, but their tool is going to be mind control. So how do you get people to be lazy? Well, computer games and video games are a great way, and that's probably straight from watching my teenagers play them, but there's going to be mind control and the melding of magic and technology. That's a great fun thing to explore as well in the next book.
Oh, fun. So how do you balance your day job and raising teenagers and life and writing? How do you juggle all that?
Not always very well. Not always very well. Well, writing for me, it's my fun place. It's the one thing I do all day that is just for me, and then eventually for readers. But it's kind of like I try to guard that time and that thing that I do. I have to carve out time for that because it's carving out time for me. It's gotten easier over the years now that the kids are teenagers and one of them's driving. I don't have to worry about hauling them to and from school. They actually give me plot points. They ask what I'm writing, and coming from Gen Z and all the fun media that they consume, they've actually given me some great ideas. And my daughter, who happens to be an artist, has provided graphics and artwork for the chapter headings for each of the books. So if anybody grabs a copy of Catching Hell, they'll see this little demon kitty, and this demon kitty is going to evolve kind of like a Pokemon. Jinx is going to end up with a demon cat as a companion who's much more than she seems. Oh. So it's been they're actually helping out now, and they like writing as well. My son has a whole world that he wants to build, and he says he might write it someday. So maybe it's contagious. I don't know. But it's a great escape from reality. And also, like, when I wasn't writing for a while because of family circumstances, my parents' decline and health issues, then COVID, then switching jobs. I mean, it was a very sad place because I felt like I was very out of control of my life. And when I got back into writing, that's something I can control. Mm-hmm. I don't care what Bruce, one of my characters who always inserts himself into every single story I try to write, says. I'm in charge. I'm in control. I choose where the book goes. So it's kind of nice. It's kind of nice to be able to, like, when you feel like there's chaos in the world, at least you have agency and can control your writing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's actually, it's been a sanity saver, even though it is a lot of time. It's been such a sanity saver, very healing in some instances, and just fun.
Yeah. So what does like good writing time look like for you? Do you have like rituals around it, or anything that is like kind of, this is my writing space? Or is it just like, no, I have an hour, everybody's out of the house or whatever, I'm going to write?
It's usually when I can. So weekends, sometimes I can get, like, I'm hoping to get a lot more words in today, but usually it's like, I do best if I can do sprints and then take a break and kind of process what I've written and come up with some new stuff. So I'll try to write 2,000 words, then I'll go to the kitchen and make a snack for all of us. And then I'll come back and write. Or then I'll do another 2,000 words on a good day when I'm not staring at the computer.
I'm listening to you, like 4,000 words in a day is a lot. That's a lot of work.
Those are on my good days. Sometimes it's like, okay, I write 250 words. Let's be more realistic. 250 words. And then I go do some laundry. Then I come back and maybe another 250 words. And then I'll go do something else. So I think, I don't know. I've never been formally diagnosed with ADHD, but I would not be surprised. So I think that's generally how I work. I've got lots of things going on at the same time, whether it's my work life or my personal life. So that seems to be the space where I can thrive most creatively. Usually if I have like 2 hours to sit down and I think I can do a lot, it just doesn't work because I've got to get up and take breaks. I've got to move. I've got to move my body so I can think, or I've got to, the scene just comes to me later. That's my chaotic process that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't.
Yeah. I know everybody has their own process. I'm always, there's always that, like, anytime anyone interviews a writer, it's always like, well, what is your writing process? I'm like, I can tell you, but it isn't going to mean anything to anybody else necessarily. No.
And I'd say, I would give advice to newer writers is like, eyes on your own paper. You are not emulating anyone else. You're not competing with anyone else. You're going to find your voice and your way of doing it. And your way of doing it is correct. And somebody else's other way of doing it is also correct for them. There's no right or wrong way to go about this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important. And we've talking with other writers on the show, like, I think that's come through a lot is that, your process is your process. There's no, there's, like you said, there's no right or wrong way to do it. And then yet we all still have that, little bit of imposter syndrome, a little bit of, am I doing this right? Or, you get halfway through a novel and you're like, why do I think I know how to do this? So.
Oh, yeah. And I've talked to people who've written 25 books and are most of their indie bestsellers, but they'll still say to this day it's the same thing. They don't know if they can write the next book. They don't know if they're convinced they don't know what they're doing. Yeah. But I would say trust the process that you've developed and also be okay with it evolving. I am a pantser. I consider myself a pantser, but in order to keep up with this new world that I'm building with all the intricacies, all the different demon species, all of the different types, powers and restrictions, I've actually started writing a few outlines, and I would have sworn I would never, ever do that because that is not how I write. That is not how I do things. But at this point in my writing life, it works. That works for my process, so I'm going to embrace it.
Yeah.
If it goes away and I go back to being a total pantser, well, that's okay too.
Yeah, I do think when you make the decision to write a longer series, even as a pantser, you do have to plan a little bit.
Absolutely. And I would say story Bible, because I went several months between writing the first Jinx book and then now writing this one. And it was all in my head at one point, but I swear to God, there's so many different details that I can't remember. And I'm so glad that my other writing buddy, Jody Wallace, said, build your story Bible now so you will not regret it when you're 3 books in and you don't remember what this character can do. You don't remember whose eye color this is. You don't know any. And I'm like, that was such valuable advice, just like having like crib notes for all of these things.
Yeah, I think the story bubble thing is huge. And I ignored the advice on the first book. I did a little bit of like character sketch stuff. So I had that on the first series. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I had to go look up in my own book about what something had happened or what this person said in this conversation. And I was like,
my first 2 series, I had so many books in there, and it's probably like by the 3rd series, okay, I'll listen, I'll do it now. And it actually, when I was able to pick the writing back up, that has been a huge help.
Yeah, and I just think, the longer you're in it and the more you've written, the more the stuff doesn't stay. Because there's not space. Like you're cooking the new thing. So the old stuff kind of has to fall away. Yeah. And you just can't remember.
No, I mean, I can barely remember where I put my phone. I can't find my car keys half the time. So why would I remember all this stuff that I vomited out of my imagination 2 years ago, right? Yeah. So I don't know. I've embraced that. I did not do that at first. I kind of regret it, although it is what it is. But I'm so glad I've got a good story Bible now, because these books are actually going, aside from the little hiccup, are going faster. It's the first time I've written in first person POV, which I found that goes super fast. I like writing in that space. I've always done third person and dueling POVs, but this one's really, it's cool because you can feel like you're in the character's head, but also it creates so many opportunities for conflict, because if you're only in her POV, she thinks she knows what all these other characters are thinking, but she has no clue. And so being able to communication and miscommunication and stuff like that is great fun.
I don't know. I like the idea too, because you're right. The first series I did, third person, and there's multiple POVs, and then this series that I'm working on now is first person, one POV, and it is it's a challenge when you're used to knowing everything in the story going on.
It is, it is, and you have to find clever ways to see, something that your protagonist, the POV voice, doesn't know, but will find out and drop hints around. Yeah. And if you can create that aha moment where your reader's yelling at the book, "Oh my God, they're not thinking this. They're going to screw you over. How can you not see that?" Yeah. Those I live for those moments when you can do that. You can get a reader so invested that they're yelling at the protagonist because, it's like, I know what's going to happen. You have no clue what's going on.
Yeah. And it's like, even that, you have to make them an unreliable narrator. It's just that they have gotten it wrong in their head.
Yes.
Like they just have the wrong end of things or whatever. So.
Right. And that beautiful moment when they get clarity, it's always great too.
So what do you think, like in your writing, has surprised you the most?
But I'm still doing it after so long. It's no, seriously, because I've tried so many different hobbies. Well, I don't consider writing a hobby anymore. It's like, it's part of who I am. But I tried so many different things. I've tried sketching, I did scrapbooking for a while. I tried quilting and all that stuff. Gardening seems to have stuck through COVID, but it's the one thing I can always come back to, and there's still that thrill, and it's new and it's fresh. And I learned something in every book that I write, whether it's an epiphany about the world, or usually it's something about, I had no idea. I did not know that about myself, but but this is apparently what my brain is cooking up. And, I see the connection to, something I've experienced or something I've heard about. So, it's always new and surprising and fresh. The novelty has never worn off. And so I think that's what keeps me writing.
Yeah.
And that's what was a surprise. I thought, especially in some of the hard days when, you look at your Amazon sales and you see that the numbers aren't necessarily fantastic. You're like, why am I doing this? Oh, because I love it. Because I feel amazing when I've gotten like a really great scene, or I'm like, I can't wait for, even if it's one reader, somebody to read this and go like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is definitely, I try not to gauge my own success on the Amazon numbers, but sometimes it's hard to go. This is kind of an expensive hobby sometimes. So.
It is. But, at the same time, I think there's room for success. There's so many readers out there. And yes, they're very spoiled for choice, which for readers is a really great thing. But somebody will discover you, and then they'll tell their friends, and then you will find readers who are going to be hungry and gravitate toward you. I have to believe that.
So what's the thing that surprised you most, or you think about your writing has surprised other people the most that you've heard back on? Because I know that you write pretty steamy.
I know. And this last thing, so can we go ahead? Can we plug A Very Cryptic Christmas?
We can plug A Very Cryptic Christmas.
This is an anthology.
It will have already come out by the time this airs. So definitely.
Well, go buy a copy because that's going to be great. You really want to see this. So yeah, that one's a fun series because it's all about unexpected encounters and rendezvous with mythical creatures. So yeah, I mean, this is the story that's in there, which is about a fae seer and a kelpie who meet at Cheekwood, which is also in Nashville, during the holiday season, is literally the steamiest thing I've ever written. And I did not know that about myself, but it was great fun to explore, and it turned out to be a good part of the series. So yeah. I think probably the thing that would surprise most people who know me is like, it's so out there in terms of like fantasy and magic and stuff that it's a space that I don't deal with in my quote unquote real world at all. I'm very much, scientific process, hypothesis, concrete facts, all that stuff. So people seem to be surprised. It's like, well, why don't you write science fiction, or why don't you write, laboratory stuff? And I tried to do that, but my problem is I'm so close to that I will spend 20 pages telling you about how to do an experiment and nobody cares. They just want the story to go on. So I can function better in terms of telling the story in a space that I don't live in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've surprised a lot of people like, you write what? Like, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I hate the stigma that romance gets, or, sometimes urban fantasy and stuff like that. It's ridiculous. Like, yeah, so what? It's romance. It's wonderful. I think a lot of men could read it and get great relationship advice and what women actually want, because it's literature. I mean, it's not just for women, but it's primarily by and for women, which is a patriarchy. That's why it gets crapped on all the time. But I mean, it's also a $1 billion industry that's keeping the publishing world afloat. And that's nothing to shake a stick at. It's popular because readers are avid. Readers love it.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for that, because I have an opportunity to write something that readers might like.
Exactly. Yeah. And I do think, it's interesting that when you said that, urban fantasy and paranormal romance kind of get the same thing. Because I do think, even like just if you go to like boards where people talk about urban fantasy, they get really upset when there's some paranormal romance in their urban fantasy. Like people get really bitchy about it. And I'm like, they're cut from the same cloth, right?
Exactly. Like, yeah. I mean, I have what I would call romantic elements in the Jinx story. So like the primary arc is her finding herself and finding her way to fighting demons. There are pages and pages where she's not communicating with her love interest, but he's there and it's important. It's an important part of life. I mean, how boring would life be if we didn't have a little romance and find a partner, So I don't see why people would be upset. I mean, even Star Wars, look at Han Solo and Leia, and we'll ignore the whole thing with Luke and Leia but I think all great stories have a touch of romance in them. Just like they have a touch of action and adventure, a touch of mystery. It's just one of those things. But again, I think it gets a bad rap because everybody's like, it's girl stuff. No, it's people stuff. Yeah, and it's great and it's awesome.
And I think when you look at like urban fantasy, like if you go back to like kind of the birth of urban, I don't know if it's really the birth of urban fantasy, because I think it came out of a lot of places at once. I mean, I think, Neil Gaiman and Charles DeLint and all those people, Anne Rice. I mean, I think they all kind of fed what became urban fantasy.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's always a romantic element.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah. The guys don't get crapped on when they do it. They get celebrated. It's so unfair. It's a double standard.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, I think
we
Charles
can have a whole conversation about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think Charles DeLint's work especially is very romantic. I mean, he's almost like the pre-Raphaelite writer of early urban fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think there's a lot of, genre snobbery around those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I mean, people love it and people read it. And I mean, the thing I like about both, paranormal romance, contemporary romance, whatever you're writing, and urban fantasy and contemporary fantasy is there's escapism, but there's reality. Like you can deal with sometimes really hard truths in a space that feels a little bit safer than straight lit.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
that's why when you finish reading and they get their happily ever after, happily for now, it's so cathartic because you've gone on this journey with them, and you kind of learn a little bit about, maybe you see some parallels in your relationships, or like you can learn in the beginning, you know, with some of this, especially the ones that are very traumatic and tumultuous to start with, you can learn a lot of what not to do in a relationship.
Right.
But again, I love it. It's beautiful seeing the growth, if it's done well, the growth of both characters that bring them to a point where they're ready to receive and give love. And that's a beautiful journey. I think that's so essential to the human experience. It's just amazing. I love to read that.
Yeah. And I'm going to flog your Soul Broker series that starts with Waking the Dead, because I just at the end of all three of those books, and I mean, I'm a softie and I won't cry a lot, but I like sobbed at the end because they are so emotionally true about like just how difficult those situations she's in are in. And just the, I'm getting kind of emotional thinking about it right now.
Oh my gosh, that means so much, because I know those books were like, it was very much cross genre. I broke a lot of conventions. You know, it's third person POV, but only one POV. But, and I understand it's not everybody's cup of tea, but writing it was so healing for me. I didn't realize, I mean, I had some things to work through, like with the situation that the protagonist is in, where she's caring for her special needs sister. That has a lot of parallels in my personal life of what my life could have been if my brother hadn't unfortunately passed away. So being a caregiver, feeling alone, you know, processing all of those emotions, processing the emotions of people around you, they were hard to write. I'm glad I wrote them. I'm glad they touched you, and I'm glad they've touched some other people's lives. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why with some of the other series, I'm not going to say I won't go dark and go like that again, but I did need a break from that. So that's why Jinx, I mean, it has its dark moments and its dark places, but there's also a lot of humor and fun in those books too.
Yeah. And I do love the humor in Jinx. And I mean, I just enjoy your writing, but I think that series particularly, and I think it is because you broke a lot of urban fantasy rules. I mean, because I love cross genre stuff. I write in that space, which
I know,
as you know, is hard to market and hard to slap a label on. But
so hard to market, and it was hard to find the audience. So the people who love it have said that they love it because it's different. It's out of that box. The people who don't love it were, I think, expecting it to be in that box, which I totally get. But no, it was hard to write, but it was good that I wrote it. And it was a fun world to build. I actually learned how to effectively world build with that series, which was a learning curve. But by the end, what Waking the Dead, the first book, eventually became all those lessons I hope paid off.
And I think you see it in the new series too. I mean, I think you can tell like your arc has changed in your writing a little bit because of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like a lot of people. I know I have to talk to my daughter about this because she doesn't always want to save her older pieces of art because they aren't quote unquote as good as her newer stuff. I'm like, well, that's actually a good thing because that shows you're growing as an artist, and that doesn't mean the stuff that you did before was bad, but you should save it as a record, and also like you know you can see your journey. So that's kind of how I look at some of the earlier things that I wrote, you know. And I love it when somebody says, you know, I read your first series and it was okay, but this is so much better. And I'm like, I take that as a huge compliment because that means that I am growing. I'm getting better at my craft. I'm getting better at pacing. I'm getting better at setting. You know, that's so gratifying because you don't want to be stuck in a rut. You want to, at least for me, with each book, I want to bring something different to the table and expand. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I think you're right. Like, you know, for your daughter, like with visual art, to have that record, and like, you know, for published authors, like that record is out in the world. Like it's
absolutely,
which is
both great and terrifying. I mean, if I find somebody who's read one of my earlier books, I'm like, oh God, what are they going to think of it? Or it's really awkward, you know, when somebody says, oh, what do you write? And it's a coworker, and I'm like, oh, it's not safe for work. Let's say that first. Yeah. If you want to check it out, that's fine. If you like it, that's great. If you don't like it, that's okay too. I'm not going to be mad, but just know that it's a very different side of me than you might be familiar with.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
actually, I don't know if it's the same for you. It's easier for me when strangers say that they've read my books or talked about them. I mean, not my writing buddies. I trust you guys. I can be vulnerable and be completely open because you guys get it. But like when somebody, you know, who's a friend or a family member picks up a book, it's always a little terrifying because I don't know what they're going to think.
Yeah. And I do think, you know, it's different when you read a book by someone you don't know than when you read a book by someone you know, because you're looking for clues of that person you know in that book. And that can be like my sister read Who by Water and was like, are you Joe? And I was like, no.
I got that too with the Soulworker series. Are you Vivian? I'm like, oh, thank goodness I'm not Vivian. That poor woman goes through so much. No.
There are elements of me because I wrote it, and you write. It's easy to write people who have aspects that you understand from your own personality,
right? But
it's not me, and I don't want it to be me. Like it's not a self-insert book. Right. Other than, you know, yes, what I'd like to, you know, not now, but at one point I did want to have a tea house. You know, like, you know, there were things about that I wanted, but it was much better in a book than doing it in real life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I think what readers also have to understand is like, so whatever villain or dark character you've written, that's you too. It's all an aspect of you. So like, you know, I go back and read some of the stuff with Lazarus Darkmoor, the Grim Reaper, and go, ooh, that's a little bit of my psyche, and that's a little disturbing. Or, you know, you write a silly character or a super serious character. Like, they're all aspects of like your experience. They're not you, but they're aspects of your experience or what you can imagine being out there, which I think is great. So, and I can tell you, when I read Who by Water, I wasn't thinking it was you at all. I was just lost in Joe's world, and I wanted to go drink tea with her and also go find hot and possibly dangerous unsupernatural entities to hook up with. That was really awesome.
Yeah, I guess maybe let's not dive too deep into Joe's hookups, or then we do get into a weird part of my psyche.
Oh, you know what? That's okay. If anybody reads A Very Cryptic Christmas in my story, they're going to get some really deep. Although I think it's one of the beta readers said that she wasn't expecting it because it was so cute and wholesome at the beginning, but then it becomes really steamy too. So I'm like, yeah.
No, I think that was why I liked your story, because it is very wholesome and very hot all together in one go. And I was like, that is a hard thing to accomplish.
Yeah. Because I mean, I usually start. I love the meet cute. I love, especially like so in the other series that I actually co-write with Jody Wallace in the Worlds of Magic, New Mexico, the Dragons of Terracona, which is like, it is flat out fun. It's just embracing everything with paranormal, interdimensional dragon shifters from a dimension called Terracona who come to Earth to frolic and have fun. You know, that's just like, that turned out to be very much meet cute, but then a lot of steam, and that's been a fun space to write into.
Yeah. So what, like for you, I mean, I always think for me, sex scenes are one of the hardest things to write just because I have a hard time with a lot of the vocabulary. Like I don't think I have synesthesia, but there are certain words that make me want to throw up. Like I get a weird taste in my mouth. And unfortunately, some of those are very common words that people use to describe sex. Not because I think I'm a prude, just because I think they just don't taste right, which is weird to say.
No, it's not at all. I mean, this is one of those things where you do what's comfortable for you, and it's still going to be an amazing scene. There are many different ways to write a sex scene.
So how do you decide like what level of steam that scene is going to need? Or
I think it just depends on the characters and their growth. So like if they're working through some issues where it's like, you know, reunion sex or, you know, sex after being apart for a while, that might be a little bit more steamy and a little bit more fast-paced and aggressive. If it's something more like in the cryptid story where it's all about vulnerability and acceptance, then that really frames how far I go and what happens. It's usually, for me, it's like, I wish I could do some more gratuitous sex because that would probably sell well. But for me, the key is just like the emotion and what is it telling you about the character based on how they make love.
Yeah.
As far as words, I have the same thing. I have a hard time with some words. And so I just generally, I don't use them. I find other ways. I mean, I don't like flaming sort of manhood or things like that, but
Yeah, I mean, there's like 80s romance, like alabaster thigh kind of stuff just doesn't fly either. No. I don't like it to be so euphemistic that you're just like, really, what's going on here? And like absolute like clinical anatomy words don't work either. So I think each writer kind of has to find a place somewhere in between there. But it is interesting. And I think what you said about why are they having sex? What is the context? Because I think that to me is what makes a good sex scene, is that it's not necessarily gratuitous, but that it is furthering the story. So you're getting the emotional context and impact and fallout from that in a way. I mean, unless you're writing erotica and then write as much gratuitous sex as you want to write, that's great. That's why people read it.
I've read some of those books and I was like, wow, that is amazing. And I'm blushing, but in the best possible way. It's not something that I've been able to write, but I mean, it's like, I think as long as know your genre and also know how does it serve your story,
right?
And then for me, I also get around some of those things with the clinical stuff where I'm just focused on not so much what they're doing but what they're feeling while they're doing it. I try to go deep into their emotional response and all that too.
No, and I think it pays off. I mean, I always enjoy your sex scenes just because I'm like, it's like, yes, they're hot, and also I'm admiring the craft at the same time.
Oh, you're so sweet. See, I feel the same way about your writing too, especially like the story elements and how you weave everything together. And like, I think it was in the second book where you really like had a lot of twists and turns that was like, oh my God, how did she pull that off? I need to learn how to do that.
Oh,
wow.
I didn't know this is going to be our mutual appreciation episode, but I love it.
Totally, I gush about your stuff because I love your writing so much. I feel like, we can definitely relate to each other with, the cross genre and, being a little out of the box. But it can be done well and it can be done beautifully. And I love how you've done that with your series.
Same. Well, I want to give you an opportunity to plug stuff coming up or other stuff, because if you want to talk about, you've also written some nonfiction.
Oh, sure. So stuff that's coming up. So I think by the time this is out, the 12 Cryptids of Christmas, or not the 12, a very cryptid Christmas, because we didn't quite have 12, which is great fun, super fun anthology with a lot of amazing writers. I haven't read everybody's story, but I've read enough to know that you guys are going to love it. It's so good. Some of it's just funny and fun and out there, but it's just great. It's fantastic. So I'll definitely plug your story. I'll plug everybody else's story. Ruby's got her Banshee. I was just like swooning the whole time I was reading that story too. And Angela, does she write under Alice?
D.S.
She writes under a different
D.S. Dane.
D.S. Dane, yes. So D.S. Dane's story, you'll never look at Krampus the same way in the best possible way. It is so good. It's the best. Yeah, so definitely pick up a copy of that because they're like, it's an anthology with shorts, so you can read them in an afternoon. Grab your cup of coffee, your pumpkin spice, whatever, or your peppermint mocha, and have a little sizzle and spice. Yeah. I don't have a release date yet, but I'm hoping that Hellbent, the second book in the Jinx McGee series, will either be out later this year or at the very beginning of 2023. So where we left Jinx in the first book is she's in trying to save the world from a big bad demon lord. She's unwittingly unleashed the 7 powerful demons of temptation, all the 7 deadly sins, out into the world, and how is she going to capture them and bring them back, and what is that going to do to her team, all while she's trying to heal her team of misfits, everybody from an amazing, super smart team member who has basically a demon of knowledge, like her own personal Wikipedia, a reformed shoplifter who has a greed demon who helps her investigate this poor, gentle Russian giant who has a wolf demon within him, and poor Jinx who's like trying to have tacos and tequila, find her car keys, and then go save the world.
Awesome. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
I've got a website, ddcedars.com. So all of my stuff, I ran a blog intermittently. So, but usually I have updates, and all the different books are there. And I'm on Twitter at DB Sieders. Facebook Cedar Sirens is a nod to the Mermaid series. And if anybody knows anyone who has had breast cancer or who is a survivor, is going through it right now, caregivers. So the universe has an interesting sense of humor, because I spent 20 years doing breast cancer research, and then I ended up getting breast cancer in 2018. Yay! It did give me a unique perspective on the science of breast cancer, but then the personal experience. So because I was already writing anyway, I wrote a book about it called Talking to My Tatas. And so it's chock full of science and swear words, but also practical advice for anybody who's going through the disease. And I try to do it with a healthy dose of humor and heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I highly recommend to you. And I've recommended it to several friends who are in that same space. So,
if I can help one person, because nothing prepares you for it, for hearing that you have cancer, even though I knew too much, but not enough. Mm-hmm. So if I can give one person comfort or make them feel like, you're going to be okay, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Then that's the goal.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all your links in the show notes, and so people can track you down there. And I highly recommend your work to folks who just, want to read good stuff or need an escape or all of the above.
Oh, you're so cool. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a fun conversation.
Well, we have one more question. We have our little game of chance.
Yes. Okay. I'm excited.
So I'm going to roll a die, and depending on what I roll, you'll get a question about death, sex, religion, politics, or money.
Okay.
All those lovely things we're not supposed to talk about in polite company, whatever that means. And if I roll a 6, you get to pick which one you want. And I'm kind of hoping you don't get sex, because I think I already asked you that question.
Okay.
Or don't get 2 about the sex question.
Okay.
And it was a 2, so I'm going to roll it again, because I already asked you that question.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, no, please do. Yeah, let's see what else the universe can throw at us.
Is my Scorpio topic of interest, and what I write about the most. Although you write a lot about death too.
Yeah.
So what do you want to happen to your notes or your unfinished work when you die?
I would let it go to my daughter first, especially if she's thinking about writing and doing a little bit of writing. But beyond that, I have a couple of trusted writer friends who I would say, take this with my blessing, do with it what you want. If you want to finish the series, if you want to do something, please, let the world live on. And, I trust you, the people I would leave it to, I would trust, to do right by it.
Yeah, I like that. So I have kind of a follow-up to questions, because I've wondered, I've talked to a lot of nonfiction writers about this question, and I think, they're like, well, they've done a lot of research, they've done all this stuff. And I think we have this idea of lit writers collections in libraries, but I think there's probably an importance of saving genre writer stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And, what would you say, like the academic value down the road? Although we talked a little bit before about academia and how it needs to be overhauled.
Absolutely.
But what do you think the academic value of saving those genre writers' notes and libraries? How is that going to shake out later? Because I think about, technically Charles Dickens was a genre writer, so how does that shake out in your mind?
I think for future generations of writers, knowing where you come from and knowing why things have changed, I can see that being somebody's going to write a thesis on that when they look back. Like, for example, like you were talking about some of the books in the 90s that have a lot of exposition and a lot of extra world building that wouldn't fly these days, because we're looking for action, hook the reader from the get-go, keep the pace going. So, and it'll be interesting to see, because everything comes and goes in waves. So right now it's very much almost, I think we talked about this, almost like you've got your book, but it's almost like you're prepping it for the screenplay. And sometimes that can be good, but it can also be very restrictive. So it'll be interesting to see, once this wave ends, do we go back to more exposition? Do we go back to more exploring, So I think looking at trends and probably how that's a reflection of society. There's so many current events. I know you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to write evergreens, but whatever. I mean, it's a part of the world that we live in. So it's fun for me to go back and look at some of my favorites and look at like how technology's changed and like, thinking about, oh, well, if I want to write a historical, it's sad to think that the 80s would be a historical, but in a way it would be. Like, how could you, work in that space, and how could you make, you don't always remember things, I do remember when I didn't have cable TV, when I didn't have a cell phone and all of those things. And now I can't imagine living without them. And I admire people who can write in the past and not just accidentally leave like something out that's so technologically driven. So I think it's a good record of, and then, of course, lots of things are reflecting current events. I think I would love to see somebody write a master's thesis about the relevance of Chuck Tingle to his time, right? Because I mean, he's great and he's spoofy, but like everything he writes, even though it's like, pounded in the butt by the Tyrannosaurus, or like by the dress that changed colors, that was a trend a few years ago. Like, who's going to remember that? Well, if you look back at Chuck Tingle's writing, you'd be like, oh, I remember when that was a thing. Oh, this was about this political thing. I think it's an interesting, like almost like a fun time capsule of like a story that's telling you about what was going on during that time.
Yeah.
So for academic value, I think that would be fun. Like if I could go back and do academics, I probably would do like, something about English lit and try and dive into the genre thing. That would be so much fun. I would enjoy writing a thesis about that. And I would enjoy all the research and reading about that.
I'm about to sneeze.
Bless you.
Oh, okay. I love the idea of a dissertation on tinglers. I love it.
Yes.
I want to read it now.
yeah, absolutely. That would just be like the best thing. I don't know. I probably wouldn't be the one to do that, just because I wouldn't be able to keep a straight face while talking about it.
Well, plus his, I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know.
Persona. Yeah.
His persona on Twitter is just a delight. On top of that.
It is. So. I can't get enough. I just love. Yeah.
Yeah, I just love the idea of that. I hope somewhere out in the ether someone is listening and writing their dissertation on Chuck Tingler.
Please, and then make it. I think all dissertations are supposed to be publicly available, so that would be great. I would read the shit, pardon my language, out of that dissertation.
Oh no, we're explicit. You can read the shit if you need to. But no, I do like that, and I do. I do think there is importance in that. And it's funny you say, we're all supposed to write evergreen, like. I'm reading, I think will have already aired by the time this comes out. So AJ and I read Anne Rice's The Witching Hour. Yeah. It's written in 1990 or it was published in 1990. So written in the late 80s. Yeah. And like, you're like, oh, this could have been solved with a cell phone. Like,
Yeah,
it's real different to like, even though you think you're writing an evergreen story, technology changes. Attitudes, mores, those things change.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, you're looking at like Beowulf, which my daughter is reading. I don't know why we still read that. I do kind of know why, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I don't think it's very relatable. Although I do like the monster Grendel and his mother and all that stuff too. But like looking at like how I would write it differently, like if I was fanficking it or something like that, would be very different than, people who first uncovered it and translated it. But it's very telling about that time and, what people were going through and being legitimately afraid of monsters because they didn't understand the world around them.
Yeah. And people have written, I mean, it has engendered like different takes. Actually, I know a person who wrote a take on Beowulf that's from the point of view of Grendel's mother.
Ooh, cool.
So yeah,
I think I might need that rec.
I will. Maybe I need to get her on the show.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, but there's definitely
that intrigues me very much. Yeah, the other side of the story. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, I think there's like you said, it's like diving into mythology and all those things. There's because you get to filter it through the lens of the time you're living in. Yeah, you can mix that stuff up and make new stories. So. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, Dana, DB, thank you so much for being on the show. We did talk about your other book, which people will know that's your name too, but
yeah, that's great. Okay. I mostly just did DB because, there's that whole thing again about, people won't pick up a book because it's written by a woman. But also, I think it's hilarious because Sieders is my married name. And if you Google me, you find out way more about if you Google Sieders, you find out way more about me than my husband, which I think is just absolutely hilarious. It's the best. It's like I've completely co-opted that name.
It is yours. It is yours now.
It is mine forever, yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, take care, and we will talk soon, and maybe even again after your next book comes out.
Yay, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Yes, definitely. WitchLit is a production of Thousand Volt Press and is edited by Kaifel Agostini. Our music is Voices by Alexander Shenekar. You can support our work at ko-fi.com/witchlitpodcast. And if you'd like to submit your own death, sex, religion, politics, or money questions, or have questions or comments about the show, you can send an email to victoria@witchlitpod.com. And please be sure to let us know if we can use your name on the show. Transcripts and all our previous episodes are available at witchlitpod.com, and you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter @witchlitpod. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and consider giving us a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps other witches find the show. Thanks for listening and for reading witchy.